Welcome to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. I'm Christian of Standing Stones Healing, founder of the Reiki Business Collective and creator of the Build Your Reiki Business program, sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business. Greetings, welcome, and thanks so much for tuning in. It's Christian of Standing Stones Healing. So honored and grateful to have you here for another episode of the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. So thank you so very much. In this week's episode, we're talking about intuition. Intuition for your Reiki business. But first, of course, I want to invite you to join us for the live online Reiki Business Summit happening this November 22nd to the 25th. This amazing 4-day summit is bringing you 6 presentations from Reiki business leaders on a variety of Reiki business topics. In addition to that, you'll have plenty of time for live networking and discussion with other Reiki business owners and practitioners considering starting a Reiki business. So no matter where you are on your Reiki business journey, you are welcome. You can learn more and register right now at a special early bird price at standingstoneshealing.com/summit. Thank you. Intuition is a popular topic in not only the Reiki community, but also other types of spiritual communities. And always there are questions about how do I develop my intuition? Now, I first want to say that when we feel like we need to develop on our intuition on our journey, so oftentimes this desire is coming from a place of lack. It's coming from a place of not feeling good enough. It's coming from a place of feeling like our intuition isn't as developed as someone else's. So let me give you an example of this. So often in the Reiki community, we hear concerns from practitioners who aren't receiving messages. Maybe during their sessions, they're not getting information. They aren't seeing images. Maybe they aren't having dead loved ones or angels join the session and offer messages to the client. They can feel if a client asks them, oh, what did you see? What did you feel? And they're thinking, oh, I didn't really see or feel anything. They can feel maybe like they are less of a practitioner. And so when practitioners, Reiki practitioners, want to focus on developing their intuition, often it's because they feel that there's some lack that they're experiencing in their own intuition. They feel like they're not receiving messages that they quote should be receiving. They feel like they're just not tapped into their intuition. And oftentimes they feel like others are more developed in their intuition than they are. Now, does this sound familiar to you? Maybe you experience this yourself, but my guess is that it might sound familiar to you just from the standpoint of being an example of a way in which we human beings compare ourselves to others. And we as human beings like to compare ourselves to others. Let's admit it, that even though we might compare ourselves to others and it might feel like we don't measure up and then we feel bad about ourselves, let's admit that we are always comparing ourselves to others. And let's admit that oftentimes Reiki practitioners are comparing their intuition to other Reiki practitioners' intuition. Now, let's just pause for a minute and realize, in a sense, how kind of funny and even silly that is. And so if this is you, I don't mean to say, oh, get over it, silly. I mean to say it's normal, it's natural, it happens, not just with intuition, but of course in all kinds of ways. And so in some ways, it may be natural for us to compare our intuition with someone else's intuition. But it also isn't fair. It's not fair for us to compare our intuition with someone else's intuition and to say, oh, their intuition is so well developed, mine's not. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my intuition? And the answer is nothing. Nothing is wrong with your intuition at all. Now, I also want to make sure to take a step back here and mention very clearly and very emphatically that receiving messages during a session is not something that Reiki practitioners have to do. It is not something that you are required to do as a Reiki practitioner or business owner. And indeed, so often, the information that we receive and the way in which we convey it can indeed do more harm than it does good. And so I want to first and foremost encourage us that there is no requirement whatsoever to receive information during a session. If you don't receive information during a session, it doesn't mean that you are not a good practitioner. And if you don't receive messages during a session, it doesn't mean that your intuition is not developed or that there's something wrong with your intuition. It's also important to note that receiving information during a session is also not even part of the system of Reiki. I feel really fortunate in my Reiki training that my teachers never talked about receiving information or messages. One of my teachers brought up one example of one time where she had an experience in one of her sessions where she just felt that something was off before the session started and therefore did not offer the session. But there was never, ever any discussion about receiving information, what kinds of information you would receive, nothing. And so I very fortunately never had the impression in any of my trainings that this was something that I quote unquote should be doing and that I should be receiving information. So I want to say thanks to my teachers for that. And I want to say to you, Reiki practitioner, that there is no requirement ever to receive information. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you as a Reiki practitioner, and it's not even part of the system of Reiki. So, dear Reiki practitioner, please release the expectation that you should be receiving information during a session. Please release the expectation that you should be passing that information along to a client as well. Release that. There's no requirement to share anything with a client that might come up. And please also, I want to encourage you to release that normal, natural desire that we have as humans to compare ourselves to one another, including our intuition. I also finally want to say that what we call intuition is different for different people. And so even though, let's say in a session when I say, oh, if you don't receive any information, well, to some practitioners that might mean seeing things, seeing angels or deceased loved ones. To another practitioner that might mean feeling things, so feeling heat or cold. To another practitioner, that might mean smelling something. So all of those clair senses, the audience and the sentience and the alience and all of those clair senses, we all have intuition that works in different ways. And so when you think of it in that way, it's actually is silly to compare our intuition with someone else's because, for instance, I'm rather clairaudient. I hear things. And that's one way that I receive a lot of intuitive information. Someone else might feel things, like they might feel something, a sensation in their body. Now, is that better than hearing information? And how do you compare those two? You really can't. And so that means that even while we try to compare our intuition to someone else's, we really can't, because we all receive intuitive information in different ways, and we all experience our intuition and use it differently. Now, with all of that being said, what if you want to develop your intuition? So you want to make your intuition stronger, more powerful, be able to see or feel or sense more things, or whatever that means to you. Because of course, because our intuition is so personal to each of us, how we might want to quote unquote develop it is very personal to each of us as well. But when we talk about developing our intuition, I do believe very strongly that our intuition is not something that we have to quote unquote develop. And so while in this podcast episode we're talking about developing our intuition, I actually don't believe that's how it works. I believe that we are all intuitive. I believe that we are all intuitive beings. Now remember, we might receive information intuitively in different ways, but we all have an intuition. And so if we already have an intuitive sense, if we're already intuitive, I don't believe that intuition is something so much that we need to develop, as it is something that we just need to open up more to. So like I mentioned, I'm clairaudient. That's one big way that I receive information, particularly when I'm doing card readings. Yes, it happens in Reiki sessions too, but when it comes to my card readings, I'm very clairaudient with my card readings. And so I might receive information in that way where I might hear it inside of my head. But it's not so much of a developing of that clairaudient sense. There wasn't anything that I did specifically to develop that intuitive sense. Rather, it's something that I just opened up to and that I accepted more and more. And so I believe that developing our intuition is not about doing anything in particular and taking any particular action. Are there exercises that we can do to develop our intuition? Sure, there are plenty out there. I will actually share an exercise with you that I really like and find very helpful for all kinds of things in my life. So I'll share that with you. But I don't believe that developing our intuition is really about doing intuition developing exercises. I rather believe that it's really so much more about opening up to the information that we are already always receiving. And so your intuition is already developed. You already have an intuition. You've always had an intuition. Whatever that might be, however you receive information, whatever the clair way in which, the clair sense in which you might receive information, predominantly you can receive information in all kinds of ways, but you may have one that is predominant for you. Like I mentioned, clairaudience is really my predominant one. But all we really need to do is accept the fact that we are always already intuitive and that we are always already receiving information. It's just that we're not always open to it. How often do we receive an intuitive sense? Maybe it's a feeling in our gut. Maybe it's just a sense, or we even hear or see something and we dismiss it. No, that's crazy. Oh, I'm just feeling things. I'm just seeing things. I'm just hearing things. That's silly. I'm making it up. It's all in my head. We so often will be quick to dismiss the intuitive information that we receive and to say that we're crazy and we're just making it up and believing that it's not really real. But what if instead of saying, that's crazy, that's not really real, we took that information and reflected on it and said, hey, I just met this person. I feel something weird in my stomach. Why? Instead of saying, oh, that's crazy, get over it. There's nothing wrong with this person. They're safe. They're fine. They're not going to hurt you. But to rather pause and say, what's that all about? What's that feeling about? There's just something not right about this. What is that? And to explore it rather than to simply immediately shut it down. Or let's say that you are in a Reiki session and you hear some guidance that, oh, this person needs to drink more water. I'm receiving the message that this person needs to drink more water. Now, again, whether you pass that along or not is another thing. But to rather than saying, oh, that's crazy, to notice it and, reflect on it or not in the Reiki session. Some would say, think about it and reflect on it. And others would say, just clear it from your mind. It's just a thought, let it go, and bring yourself back to the present moment in the Reiki session. But rather than simply dismissing it and saying, well, that's crazy, to just notice it and recognize it and to even honor it. So I believe that our intuition is alive and well in all of us. It's simply that we maybe haven't opened ourselves up to it, or we're not opening ourselves up to it currently. That can wax and wane. Sometimes we can be more open to the messages than others, but it's not that we're not intuitive, and it's not that we're not receiving messages and information. I really believe that it's so much more about not acknowledging them and not opening ourselves up to them, and to even allowing ourselves to be distracted from them. We do live in a very distracted kind of culture with all of the bells and the whistles and the dings and everything going off all of the time, notifications all of the time for everything. We are so distracted. And intuition comes from a deep listening, being aware and in touch and being connected. And it's so very hard to be aware, in touch, and connected, essentially to be paying attention when we have so much distraction. And so if you are challenged to listen to your intuition or to even recognize that you are intuitive, I want to encourage you to consider the ways in which you may just simply be distracted. And you may just simply be distracted from your own self and your own connection with yourself. And so in that way, I really believe that our intuition is always communicating with us. It's just simply that maybe we're not listening. And we're putting up the blocks to paying attention to the intuition. Of course, I want to encourage us to release judgment of ourselves for this, because especially with our current dominant Western culture that really encourages us to be distracted, that this is not easy. And so if you're challenged with listening to your intuition, it's not you. It's a product of our way of life. But rather than doing any kind of exercises to develop our intuition, I really encourage just getting still and quiet and listening and noticing when we receive information and acknowledging it and recognizing it and dismissing those thoughts of, am I crazy? I can't say this. I can't tell you how many times during a Reiki session or a card reading where I've received a message or information and I've thought, that's crazy. I can't say that. That's ridiculous. That's crazy. And then I end up saying it and it resonates. It happens all of the time. And I've just simply learned to be open to it and to, even though I'm like, that's crazy, to recognize that actually it's really not so crazy as I might think it is. And so, of course, there are exercises that people will advocate for developing your intuition. For instance, like pulling a card and not looking at it, and then like putting your hands around it or putting it up to your head and trying to guess what the card is. What's the color of the card or what's on the card or whatever, and using your intuition. Now, I don't know about you, but when I do activities like that, when I do exercises like that, I like never get it right. And then we have the feeling of, oh no, I'm not good enough. Oh, I need to develop my intuition. Oh, there's something wrong with me. Oh, other people got it and I didn't get it, and therefore my intuition just isn't developed. No, it just means that you don't have X-ray vision and you can't see through to the other side of the card. It's called intuition, not knowing everything. And so I'm honestly not a huge fan of exercises like that help us, quote unquote, develop our intuition. And again, I don't think it's so much of something that we have to do as it is just simply an opening up to the information that we are already receiving. Now, one way that I really like to do this, and I've used this, I developed this method years ago, and I've used it, I've shared it with my students, not just students in my Reiki courses or my other kinds of courses, my Unlock Your Card Magic card reading program, but I mean, even I used to use it with like my business students, because it really is a powerful practice. And the practice is, let's say that you are faced with a question in life, a decision. Maybe you're not sure if you want to move to a particular location. You're thinking about relocating, but you're just not sure. Do you really want to do it? I recommend taking a penny. And you take this penny and you say, okay, heads up, I move. Tails up, I don't move. And you flip the penny. You catch it in your hand without looking at it. Flip it over on top of your wrist and see what the penny says. I have made many, many life decisions in this powerful way. Now, before you say, holy cow, Christian, you've made major life decisions based on what a penny says. No, this is how it works. Once you have that penny flipped over on the top of your hand with your other palm over it so it's hidden, take your hand off of the penny and look at it. The very first thing you feel or hear or whatever other sense you get, the very first thing is your answer, because this is your intuition talking to you. This is the essence of what it is you really want deep inside and how you really feel about it, because it's in that split second moment before all of the thoughts have come flooding in that cloud your judgment. That's where the true answer lies. And so let's say you are considering the move. Do I move? Don't I move? Heads up, I move. Tails down, tails up, I don't move. You flip that penny, put it over on, catch it, put it over on the top of your other hand, and then you look at it. Boom. What's that first thing that you feel immediately when you see whether the penny is heads up or tails up? What is that feeling? So let's say it says heads up and you feel, oh my gosh, the move. Yes, I'm moving. Boom, there's your answer. You want to move. You're excited to move. The answer is to move. Or you lift your hand off of the penny and it's tails up and your first thought is, oh no, do it again. There's your answer. You don't like what the penny says. You want to move. That's the moment of connection with yourself. Call it your higher power, call it your intuition, whatever it is that you want to call it. That moment of clarity is the answer. That's when you are allowing the information to come in, to arise, rather than to allow it to be clouded over by the thoughts that immediately come in. Because of course you immediately see that it's tails up and you're like, oh, no. And then the thoughts come flooding in. Well, maybe I can stay here. Or maybe it's not so bad here. The penny says tails up. So, I guess it's just not meant to be. No, that's not the answer. The answer is the very first feeling you felt, the first thing that popped up for you before all of the thinking began. That's where your intuition lies. That's where information is coming to you. It's in the moments when you're not thinking. It's the split second when you receive that information and before all of the, that's crazy, I can't think that, I can't say that, where's that coming from? That dismissive kind of talk. That's where the intuition lies, and that's something we all have. And so really, when it comes to developing our intuition, I want to encourage us that it's all about that split second when we receive information, that split second before all of the thoughts come crowding in and cloud over that feeling or sense that we had. So, what are your thoughts on your intuition? What are your thoughts on developing intuition? Are you going to give the penny trick a try? Try it out and let me know what you think. And join us in the Reiki Business Collective to tell us all about it at facebook.com/groups/Reiki Biz. I do talk more about these kinds of ideas, including another exercise that I like to do with my card reading students in my Unlock Your Card Magic program. Please feel free to check it out at standingstoneshealing.com/magic. I'm sending so many blessings and best wishes to your intuition, the intuition that you already have. The question is, are you simply going to open up to it and recognize it and honor it? Sending so many blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business. Thanks for tuning in to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, and send to a friend. Learn more about the Build Your Reiki Business program at standingstoneshealing.com/build. Sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business.